You're waking up early, devouring books, and outworking everyone you know. You thought this path would lead to a more vibrant life. But the truth is, tonight, you find yourself sitting in silence, scrolling through your contacts, and realizing there's not a single person you actually want to call. You haven't become arrogant. You haven't developed an ego. You're simply paying the success tax, that brutal price of growth that no one ever warns you about. You started waking up at 5 a.m. while the rest of the world was still dreaming. You traded mindless scrolling for deep work, picked up books on philosophy and finance, and pushed yourself twice as hard as everyone else. You thought that by becoming a better version of yourself, life would suddenly be filled with high-level connections and standing ovations. But instead, reality just slapped you in the face. It's a Friday night. You pick up your phone, scroll through your contacts, and realize you don't actually want to call anyone. The conversations that used to be the highlight of your week now feel incredibly shallow. You feel like an alien sitting among your best friends. They're gossiping about celebrities, complaining about their bosses, and mocking people who are trying too hard to get rich. Meanwhile, you're itching to talk about the future, about big ideas, about the breakthrough you're chasing. It's a gut-wrenching feeling, isn't it? It's like you've started speaking a new language, but everyone around you is still shouting in the old one. You start to wonder, am I becoming arrogant? Am I isolating myself because of some ego trip? No. You're not arrogant. And you're certainly not a bad person. The truth is, no one warned you about the success tax. No one told you that the first price of growth is profound loneliness. When a tree decides to grow taller to reach the sunlight, it must accept that its highest branches will face colder, harsher winds that the grass at the bottom will never have to feel. But why is this process so painful? Why are the people you love often the very ones who try to pull you back down? And more importantly, if this loneliness is a trap, how do you escape it without losing your soul? There is a hidden law that Alex, a 27-year-old driven by hunger, had to learn the hard way. A law called psychological gravity. To understand why Alex felt like his heart was being ripped in two, you have to understand where he came from. Alex wasn't born different. He was one of the pack. For 10 years, his world revolved around 4 guys: Mark, Chris, Leo, and Sam. They were more than friends. They were a brotherhood. They had a ritual. Every Friday night, 8 p.m. at the Anchor, a dive bar that smelled like stale hops and broken dreams. For years, it was enough. They shared a collective language of someday. Someday we'll quit these dead-end jobs. Someday we'll travel the world. Someday we'll be the ones calling the shots. But someday is a dangerous drug. It makes you feel like you're moving when you're actually standing still. Then, something shifted in Alex. It wasn't a lightning bolt. It was a slow burn. He started realizing that while they were all 27, they were still talking about the same things they talked about at 17, the same ex-girlfriends, the same complaints about the system. One morning, Alex looked in the mirror and realized he was terrified, not of failure, but of stagnation. He started reading. He invested in a $500 online course instead of a $500 weekend trip to Vegas. He started trading his sleep for sweat. At first, he tried to bring them with him. "Hey, I listened to this podcast about building a side hustle," he'd say, his eyes bright with excitement. Mark would smirk, not looking up from his phone. "Relax, Bezos. It's Friday. Just drink your beer." Chris would chime in with a warning. "Careful, man. Those gurus just want your money. Stay safe in your 9 to 5. Don't be a sucker." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Alex began to realize that his growth wasn't inspiring them, it was exposing them. Every book he read was a mirror reflecting their own lack of movement. Every hour he spent working was a reminder of the hours they spent complaining. He found himself sitting at the bar, surrounded by the people who knew him best, feeling like a complete stranger. He was still one of the boys, but the roots that held them together were starting to rot. He loved them, but he was starting to realize that the person he was becoming was no longer invited to the table he had sat at for a decade. The friction didn't stay subtle for long. It never does. When you start changing your life, you expect the world to cheer. You expect your inner circle to say, "Finally, we were waiting for you to step up." But instead, Alex encountered a phenomenon as old as time: the crab mentality. If you put one crab in a bucket, it will easily climb out. But if you put 5 crabs in a bucket and one tries to escape, the others will reach up and pull it back down to its death. It started with the jokes. Look at Mr. CEO over here. Leo would laugh, mocking Alex for ordering a sparkling water instead of a 3rd round of beer. "Too busy for the boys? Too good for our stories now?" Alex would laugh it off, but the sting stayed. He tried to compromise. He thought, maybe I can have both. Maybe I can be a high performer from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. and still be the old Alex at night. He was living a double life. In the mornings, he was consuming the wisdom of Stoics and titans of industry. In the evenings, he was nodding along to the same tired complaints about how the economy is rigged and rich people are just lucky. The psychological toll was massive. He was suffering from cognitive dissonance. Every time he sat at that bar, he felt like he was wearing a suit that was 3 sizes too small. He was shrinking himself just to fit into their reality. He was censoring his dreams because he didn't want to make them feel uncomfortable. Then came the safety intervention. One Tuesday, Mark called him. "Hey man, we're worried about you. You're obsessed. You're missing out on life. You're going to burn out for a dream that probably won't even happen. Just come back to earth, man. We miss the old you." That was the knife in the heart. Tucker. They didn't miss him. They missed the version of him that made them feel okay about their own stagnation. They missed the version of him that didn't challenge their comfort zone. Alex tried one last time to bridge the gap. He invited them over to talk about a business idea he had, hoping to give them roles, to bring them along for the ride. He spent hours preparing. They showed up 40 minutes late. They spent the whole time checking their phones, making jokes about how serious he was being. Man, just enjoy your life, Sam said, leaning back. Why do you need more? You've got a job. You've got us. Isn't that enough? In that moment, the room went silent in Alex's head. He looked at the four faces he had known since childhood and realized a terrifying truth. They weren't his support system. They were his anchors. And if he didn't cut the rope soon, he was going to drown with them. He was caught in the no man's land of personal growth. He wasn't the old Alex anymore. But he hadn't yet become the man he was meant to be. He was standing in the middle of a bridge that was burning at both ends. Then came the night that nearly broke him, his 28th birthday. In years past, this night was a riot, a blur of crowded bars, loud music, and the comfort of being surrounded by the boys. But this year, the silence was deafening. Alex had declined so many invitations to just grab a drink over the last few months that the invitations had simply stopped coming. He hadn't been invited to the group chat's latest plan. He wasn't in the loop for the birthday roast. He had successfully protected his time, he had guarded his energy, and he had focused on his goals. But as he sat there staring at a single candle, he didn't feel like a winner. He felt like a ghost. He picked up his phone. He saw a notification. A photo posted an hour ago. It was the group. Mark, Chris, Leo, and Sam. They were at their usual spot, arms around each other, grinning at the camera. The caption read, "Keeping it real with the ones who never changed." It was a heat-seeking missile aimed directly at his soul. The subtext was clear. You changed. You left. You're no longer one of us. In that moment, the success tax felt too high. The wilderness felt too vast. A wave of crushing doubt washed over him. What if they're right, he thought. What if I'm just chasing a fantasy? What if I spend my whole life grinding only to end up successful but completely, utterly alone? The human brain is wired for tribal survival. To our ancestors, being cast out of the tribe meant certain death. That's why this pain felt so physical. It was his primal brain screaming at him to go back to the cave, to apologize, to be normal again just so he could feel the warmth of the pack. He reached for his phone. He started typing a message to Mark. "Hey man, sorry I've been distant. Is there still room at the table?" His thumb hovered over the send button. All he had to do was press it, and the loneliness would vanish. He could go back to the jokes, the beer, and the comfort of being average. He could stop being the outlier and go back to being one of the boys. But then, he looked around his room. He saw the books on his nightstand. He saw the vision board he had pinned to the wall, the one with the life he promised his future family. He realized that if he went back to that bar tonight, he wouldn't be going home. He would be committing suicide, not of his body, but of his potential. He deleted the message. He blew out the candle and sat in the pitch black. He had chosen the path of growth, but he realized he didn't have a map. He was standing at the edge of his old world, looking into a dark forest, waiting for a sign that he wasn't just losing his mind. He had reached the bottom. And it was exactly here, in the cold silence of his own apartment, that he was ready for the one person who could show him the way out. A week after his birthday, Alex found himself at a high-level business seminar. He felt like an imposter. He sat in the back row, clutching a notebook, feeling the familiar sting of isolation. Everyone here seemed to have made it, while he was still just a guy who had lost his friends and gained nothing but a side hustle and a headache. During the coffee break, he found himself standing next to a man who looked like he had walked out of a history book of industry. This was Mr. Richardson. He didn't have the flashy energy of a guru. He had the quiet weight of a man who had built empires. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, son," Richardson said, not looking away from his coffee. Alex hesitated, then the truth just spilled out. "I'm trying to grow, sir. But I feel like the more I move forward, the more people I lose. I'm starting to think I'm making a mistake." Richardson set his cup down and looked at Alex. "Follow me." They walked into an empty breakout room. Richardson grabbed 5 wooden chairs and arranged them in a circle in the center of the room. "Sit in the middle," Richardson commanded. Alex obeyed. "Most people tell you that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with," Richardson began, pacing around the circle. "But they never tell you about psychological gravity. You see these 5 chairs? They aren't just seats. They are a magnetic field." He pointed to the first empty chair. "That's your old friend who complains about the boss. This one? The one who mocks your ambition. This one? The one who stays loyal to a version of you that died 3 years ago." Richardson stopped pacing. "When you sit in this circle, their energy creates a gravity. It feels warm. It feels safe. But the moment you try to stand up, the moment you try to leave this circle to find a different chair, the gravity pulls back. It's not because they hate you, Alex. It's because your movement reminds them that they are sitting still. If you fly, it proves they are grounded, and that is a pain they cannot handle." Alex looked at the empty chairs. He could almost see Mark and Leo sitting there holding his coat, telling him to stay. "The loneliness you feel isn't a sign that you're lost," Richardson whispered. "It's the feeling of your soul breaking free from the gravity of the mediocre. You aren't losing friends, you are outgrowing an environment that no longer has enough oxygen for your lungs." He leaned in closer. "You're in the gap. You've left the old chairs, but you haven't found the new ones yet. Most people panic in the gap. They run back to the old chairs just to stop the shivering. But if you can endure the cold for just a little longer, you'll find that there are other circles, other chairs, waiting for someone with your exact level of hunger." Richardson handed Alex a small, worn-out compass. "Stop looking at the chairs you left behind. Start looking at the horizon." For the first time in months, the knot in Alex's chest loosened. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't a loner. He was just a pioneer who had outpaced his tribe. Armed with Mr. Richardson's 5 chairs revelation, Alex didn't go out and burn his bridges. He didn't send a manifesto to the group chat or tell his friends they were anchors. Instead, he began a delicate, painful experiment, the Wilderness Survival Guide. The first step was the hardest: entering the wilderness. He stopped trying to fill the silence. When Saturday night rolled around and the familiar pang of FOMO, fear of missing out, hit, he didn't reach for his phone. He sat with it. He embraced the necessary silence. He realized that if he couldn't be alone with his own thoughts, he'd always be a slave to the thoughts of others. He spent his weekends in the Gap, working on his business, his body, and his mind. It was quiet, it was boring, and at times, it was devastatingly lonely. The second step was loving from a distance. A few weeks in, Chris messaged him, "Hey, we're watching the game at the usual spot. Don't be a stranger." Old Alex would have gone and felt miserable. "The experiment," Alex replied. "Can't make it tonight, man." "I'm deep in a project, but I hope the guys have a blast. Let's grab a coffee next Tuesday morning instead." By shifting the time from a Friday night bar session to a Tuesday morning coffee, Alex was changing the gravity. Predictably, the coffee never happened. Chris didn't want coffee. He wanted a drinking buddy. Alex realized that many of his friendships were actually just shared distractions. When he removed the distraction, there was nothing left to hold the friendship together. He wasn't being mean. He was being protective. He learned that you can love people without letting them dictate your trajectory. He kept the love, but he cut the cord. The third step was the most terrifying: the search for the new chair. He started showing up at meetups for entrepreneurs. He joined a local running club. He commented on the posts of people he admired. For a while, this was the experiment's failure point. He didn't instantly find a new best friend. He felt like the new kid again, awkward, out of place, and still largely alone. One evening, after a particularly awkward networking event where he barely spoke to anyone, Alex sat in his car and cried. The wilderness felt like it was never going to end. He had left his old tribe, but the new tribe hadn't claimed him yet. He was tempted to drive straight to the Anchor, walk in, and buy a round of drinks just to feel seen again. His hand was on the gear shift, but then he remembered Richardson's words. Most people panic in the Gap. He took a deep breath, shifted into drive, and went home to his quiet apartment. The experiment wasn't over. He hadn't found the wow moment yet, but he had survived the first month of the wilderness. Little did he know, the true revelation wasn't about the people he was looking for, it was about the man he was becoming while he was looking. The revelation didn't come in a crowded room or a celebratory toast. It came on a random Tuesday, 6 months into Alex's journey while he was sitting in total silence. He was looking at his old 5 chairs diagram when it finally hit him. The loneliness he had been fighting wasn't a punishment for his ambition, it was a biological necessity. In nature, when a caterpillar enters its cocoon, it doesn't just grow wings, it literally dissolves. It becomes a liquid soup. For a period of time, it is neither a caterpillar nor a butterfly. It is nothing. It is completely alone, encased in a dark shell. If you were to crack that cocoon open during that stage, you wouldn't find a developing creature. You'd find a mess. Alex realized he had been in the soup phase. The reason he felt so lonely wasn't because he was losing friends. It was because his identity was being rewritten at a cellular level. You cannot become the person you are meant to be while still clinging to the people who demand you stay the person you were. The loneliness was actually the sound of his old ego dying. He finally understood the wow moment Richardson had hinted at. The gap isn't a place you walk through to find new people. The gap is a place you enter to find yourself. Suddenly, the shallow conversations at the bar didn't make him angry anymore. They made him feel peaceful. He realized he didn't need to fix his old friends, and he didn't need them to understand him. Their inability to follow him wasn't a betrayal, it was just a different frequency. You don't get mad at a radio for not playing a TV signal. You just change the station. The real wow was this. True confidence is not the ability to walk into a room and be liked by everyone. It is the ability to walk into a room and be okay if no one likes you. For the first time, Alex wasn't looking for a new chair to feel validated. He realized that as long as he was comfortable in his own chair, the right people would eventually pull up a seat next to him. The magnetic field of psychological gravity had reversed. He was no longer being pulled down by the past. He was becoming a gravity well for the future. He wasn't lonely anymore. He was finally free. 1 year later, the world looked entirely different for Alex. He didn't just have a successful business, he had a new inner circle. His new 5 chairs were occupied by people who didn't just celebrate his wins, they challenged his limits. They were people who talked about legacy, about impact, and about how to become better husbands, leaders, and humans. When he spoke, they didn't roll their eyes. They took notes. But the biggest change wasn't the people around him. It was the man in the mirror. Alex finally realized that he hadn't lost his old friends. He had simply graduated from a version of himself that was compatible with them. He still loved Mark, Leo, and the others. Occasionally, he'd send them a message or see them for a quick hello. But the gravity no longer had a hold on him. He could love them from the shore, but he was no longer drowning in the ocean with them. If you are watching this and you feel that crushing weight of isolation right now, if you feel like the odd one out in your family or your social circle, listen closely. The loneliness you are feeling is not a sign of failure. It is the birth pangs of your new identity. You are currently in the wilderness. It is the most dangerous part of the journey because it is where most people turn back. They mistake the silence for emptiness, when in reality, the silence is just the space being cleared for something better to arrive. You aren't becoming weird. You aren't becoming arrogant. You are becoming singular. Don't trade your destiny for a seat at the table where you have to shrink yourself to fit in. The world doesn't need more people who fit in. The world needs people who have the courage to stand alone until they find the tribe they were meant to lead. The success tax is high, but the regret tax is higher. One is paid in a few months of loneliness, the other is paid in a lifetime of wondering, what if? Stay in the gap, endure the silence. Your new chairs are being prepared. And trust me, the view from the top is worth every lonely night it took to get there. Before you click away and dive back into your world, I want you to ask yourself one uncomfortable question. Are the people at your table celebrating your growth, or are they mourning the version of you that was easier to control? If you feel the weight of those empty chairs tonight, remember that you aren't alone. You are just early. Scroll down to the comments right now and type, "I am ready to grow." By typing this, you are signaling to yourself and to this community that you are willing to pay the temporary price of loneliness for the permanent reward of your potential. Read the other comments. You'll realize that in this wilderness, you are actually surrounded by thousands of others walking the same path. I'll see you in the next story.